Hey everybody, we are teaching Tilt Brush, and this particular Tilt Brush episode is all about making sculptural pieces, small object type of sketches, as opposed to the landscape or environmental or even painting mural type of sketches. With Tilt Brush, not only can we make paintings and things, but we can actually export these paintings for use in other 3D programs like Unity or Blender. So we could take a landscape and export it and use it as like level design in a video game or something. But we can also take our tools in Tilt Brush and paint shapes and objects and then export these shapes and objects and use them not only in these 3D programs and things, but then put them into 3D printers and create these shapes and objects in the real world. A sculpture, a physical object, whether we're intending on printing it or just painting it for something for other people to experience within Tilt Brush or another 3D environment, we're going to look at how we can use sculptural elements specifically to make objects in Tilt Brush. Now, we could do this in any of the environments, but one of the environments, specifically the environment called pedestal, actually gives you a reference. So no matter if you're changing scale, if you're changing size, if you're moving around, we have a reference point for where the size and the viewer is for this object we're creating. So I'm going to erase this thing. And we're going to look at how Tilt Brush can be used specifically for sculptural design rather than on a landscape scale. Now, many of the tools are still going to hold true here, bearing in mind if this is something for like an object for a video game or something we're going to 3D print. Now we're going to have to think in terms of animated brushes probably won't be as useful. Smoke types of brushes probably aren't going to be useful. Any of the solid brushes like the paint brushes should be fine. Even the textured brushes, most of our programs and most of our printers can do textures. We may or may not be able to do animated, transparent. Those are the brushes we want to avoid. Solid object brushes like our matte hull, for example, or any of the hull brushes should work very well for making objects on the scale, on the printer or 3D program that we're going to manipulate it with. Transparencies, smoke effects, those are usually done with shaders and things in the video game, not part of the model object itself. As you know from our various export episodes, the object you're going to use it in, the program you're going to use it in, will help determine the properties you need to give it, whether it's printed or video game or whatever. So let's clear out our map here. Working with our sculpture, we're going to think a little bit ahead of time on the scale we're going to work with. How big is this going to be? So that we know if we're going to be working on this type of scale or working on this type of scale, we can think ahead about the object we're going to create. Solid masses are easily done using our hull tool. Bear in mind in Tilt Brush there's no real way to carve away or carve into something. So if I'm trying to make, for example, a jar or a box that contains space, we might need to think about building it up in pieces so that those pieces are there, containing the opening within the shape that we're looking for. Since we can't carve into it, we need to build it up from pieces. Obviously, my quick sketches aren't going to fit together quite as well as hopefully something you're going to take a lot of time and pay attention to. Here's also the case where some of your settings, like the snap to alignment type of tools, can help make sure your objects stay in place and stay lined up with each other's. Anything you can do to help making sure everything stays in the same orientation will help everything fit together a little more nicely. You also have to remember that there's no way to do layers in Tilt Brush, so everything is going to be built and put together as if it was one piece. This is very helpful for 3D printing because it's all going to be built up as one piece to begin with. With Tilt Brush, we can always go in and remove these individual pieces and then rebuild them as your sculpture develops. Feel free to change scale while you're working. Now we can get inside my sculpture here and really start working on refined details, maybe bringing out objects and shapes along the side, acting as carvings, that type of thing on the sculpture itself. So at smaller sizes, they read as decorations, embellishments, and what have you. Since you can't carve, there's no way to engrave onto pieces. There's no way to dig in to these types of pieces. Fortunately, our unlit brushes, the ones that cast no shadow, can be used to sort of write over the surface. That way you're not worrying about digging in so much as just representing where pieces should take place. Now in these cases, you can also see it's hard to get them to line up, to get them to rest on that surface. So if this was for 3D printing, for example, that would be a piece that would be left hanging. Whether I'm paying attention enough, now I'm going to zoom in. You can see that gap in there. So I'm going to actually select that piece. And now I'm going to try to move it in such a way so it's touching, still visible from the front, but it's touching and making contact with the main mass, so it'll hold together as the print. It'll hold together as one object when I export it. I might even go in behind the scenes and draw some extra support lines. Invisible when you're looking at it as an object, but there to help keep the whole piece together as a unit. If this isn't meant to be printed, but just experienced in Tilt Brush by other people, maybe I'll put it on Poly, or maybe I'll put it in an online art gallery, that type of thing. Then we can now more think about how do we want the visitor to experience this piece. Do they have the controls to zoom in and look at these pieces? Or are they entirely experiencing it on the human scale, on the normal level, and this is how they interact with your sculpture? Think about those things while you're building it. If I know people can zoom in, maybe I'll want to hide details in places people won't normally see. These are the types of things we're going to think about as we build up a sculpture in Tilt Brush. So we've seen how the main tools being things like the hull brush tool, things like the wire and icing tools to make three-dimensional objects, those are the types of tools that are going to be most useful if we are going to be exporting it. If this is meant to be a sculpture in virtual reality, whether it's used in Tilt Brush or used in one of the Neos VR worlds or something like that, then we can be much more free with the tools we use. Animated tools, transparent tools will hold through in the virtual reality environment. It's when we're going to use these in a different environment. That's where we really got to think about how are the people going to be experiencing it? What are the limitations of the environment we're planning on using? Definitely blow things up while you're working on it. Get those fine, refined details. Even if the visitor is only seeing it at this scale, those little details are what really help draw the visitor in. They want to experience. So if they notice there's writing, they're going to try to read it. If they notice there's a little house, they're going to try to look in the windows, that type of thing. So feel free to add those little rich details to increase your visitor's experience with your sculpture. The main difference with sculpture and environment pieces is also going to come into the lighting. If you're doing this for print or for use in another program, keep the lighting base so you can see your object more clearly. But if this is going to be used in another virtual reality environment or keeping it in Tilt Brush, then do bear in mind the lighting you use will directly affect how people experience your sculpture. Strong front top lighting or a subtle underlighting, these are the types of things we can control in Tilt Brush. These are the types of things that the user will experience as they look at your sculpture. So these are the types of things we're going to think about doing a sculptural piece rather than doing a big landscape type of piece. I hope this helps inspire you and gives you ideas to think about. I can get inside my sculpture right here for my message today. So here I am up on top of our pedestal. Let's get our bright color for our message today. But this is what we're looking for sculpture. Whether it's small self-contained pieces, or it's pieces going to be used for 3D printing or level design in video games, subscribe. Think about going in, even more so than a landscape, think about how the user is going to experience the sculpture you're going to create. We're going to do more of this type of thing every other week here on youtube.com/shamelessmayhem. We also do this live on Twitch TV/shamelessmayhem. Let us know in the comments if you have questions about what we've done, or if you have requests for things you'd like us to do. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Have fun with Tilt Brush.